Hey everyone, Tactics here. In this video, I'll be taking you through the new raid coming in patch 11.2 MANAFORGE Omega, discussing the first 7 bosses on normal and heroic difficulty, and giving you some tips and tricks to help you defeat them and get some of that juicy loot. As a note, this entire guide is going to be based off of PTR footage, and it is possible that things like visuals, timings, and even how some of the abilities function has been changed between this testing and the raid releasing, so do keep that in mind. Regardless, I did want to just have something available for you guys day one of the patch based on last season's feedback, and if anything is extremely different, I will try and note it either in the comments, or if it's super different, I will maybe do a remake of that specific boss guide as it's needed. Speaking of specific boss guides, you will notice, of course, Dementius is not included in this video as he wasn't tested at all on the PTR. I do have a speculation video out if you want to check that out to prep if you're facing this boss early in the week. Otherwise, I'll be posting my full normal and heroic guide to Dementius in a couple of days once my guild has actually defeated the boss on live servers. So make sure to subscribe to the channel to be notified when that gets posted. Otherwise, let's get started here with boss number 1, Plexus Sentinel. So right off the bat, you will notice that everyone's going to get an extra action button here at the bottom of your screen. Make sure you have that bound. This basically uses your cloak, so you get some flavor right off the bat, and does like a blink ability, which you'll need later on in the fight when these like walls start coming at you. You basically need to use it to dodge those walls. So this is going to be a lust on pull boss. As you can see here, there's some classic passive damage for healers to heal. There's going to be some circles that might be heroic only for you to avoid, so some pretty normal stuff. The actual big mechanics right off the bat is going to be the manifest matrices. It puts out these circles on a bunch of random players, and then it's a dot as well, and after that dot expires, they drop a little like teleport rune on the ground, essentially a mine, where if anyone ever touches it, it stuns them and then randomly teleports them around the room. So you want to generally do what these people are doing over here, put it on one side of the platform. And if you want my general positioning recommendation, it's going to be to tank the boss towards this like upper left side, not a little bit central like what we're doing. And you can drop these all in like a, I think there's going to be like maybe 8 across this initial phase. So just drop all 8 along this side near the boss, and that frees up this back corner over here to put the tank buster, which is called Obliteration Arcano Cannon. I think we're gonna like put it up here through this wall we're just testing out, but don't do that. Don't worry about doing that. I would just place in this back corner, and the reason why you want to be far away from the rest of your group is because it explodes for raid damage when it expires, and it also drops a large puddle, as you see here. Boom. So you want to drop that in this corner, I would say, and you'd have the boss over here, and that would minimize the damage because that's a pretty far run back. You can stack these puddles as well, as a note, but I'm not going to go too heavy on the tank stuff, as I have a full tank video on its own that you can watch. Now, the other mechanic to be aware of is a heroic only mechanic. So if you are normal difficulty, that's it for the actual boss phases. For heroic difficulty, there's a group soak that I wanted to point out here. This Eradicating Salvo is a heroic ability. So what you want to do is you want to split your raid into 2. There's this circle here, and basically it's going to shoot 2 times at this player, and it's split damage. So half your raid wants to get in this first one. You're going to see it pop off. Boom. It knocks everyone away. And then like a second and a half later, it does another hit on the same player. So the second set of your raid would then go into this soak, split that damage. Boom. There's no debuff attached to it, so if you have the ability to like immune knockbacks or get back into the second soak in time with like a leap or something, you can do that, assuming you are healthy enough. So something to keep in mind, but just a raid split in half is totally fine. When the boss reaches full energy, there's the intermission where he'll pull you, or push you rather, back to the entrance. Make sure you do fight this pushback, because it will, if you don't fight it at all, push you through this wall. So it's a little bit of fighting. It's going to spawn a bunch of obstacles. You can use your cloak to phase through this, but like I said, in general, you want to use your cloak to phase through this wall. Boom. If you can manage to avoid some obstacles as well at the same time, great. You might be able to like phase twice, but you can see it's a pretty long cooldown. It's like a 20-second cooldown. So I would just save your cloak for the actual wall, blow up the absorb shield to end this phase, and now you are just 1 square ahead, and it's just a repeat. So as an example with a raid plan, if that helps, this is where you would want to do, right? You're towards the left side, drop these in the back right, the wall moves forward, the boss would be here, you'd put all these like here, and there would be more in the second phase, I believe, so you'd put it all like this, and the tank one wouldn't need to go all the way back, but it can go a little bit further back. depending on how mobile your tanks are. You can also stack these on the PTR at least if you want, but this is also totally fine. And that is boss number 1. Pretty straightforward, not a lot going on there. We can move on to the second boss, Loom'ithar. You can go to Loom'ithar or Soulbinder next, by the way, so you don't necessarily need to do Loom'ithar if the other boss is easier, but we're just going to cover this second because it's in the journal. So off the top here, boss is immobile in the middle of the room, and just like Plexus Sentinel, there's some passive raid damage and there's some circles to avoid. The main mechanic, though, are these webbings that spawn. It's called layer weaving. It spawns them, and basically you have to kill one of these things to prevent this circle from closing in on you and give you a spot to run. On normal, they're just available to kill, so just kill the closest one to your raid. On heroic, you see this tank line is going out. You have to hit them with the tank line to make them attackable. So you see I line it up with one near the raid. Boom, and then it's... I don't face it again, but it can be attackable. You're going to see it come on the bottom of the screen here, and it's being attacked there. Now it's killed, and there's a way for the whole raid to escape. So that is mechanic number 1. Mechanic number 2 is you can see these tethers on a few players. Basically what's going to happen is the boss will pull in a few players and tether them, and then to break that tether, you need to run 40 yards away, and when that happens, it snaps, and then it spawns a puddle underneath you. On heroic specifically, if you snap this on one of those puddles that you drop when you break this, then you will be stunned for 5 seconds, which means that you can't stack on other people when you snap it. And it also means that you can't snap it on existing puddles on heroic specifically. So you will be slowly filling up some space. So pick a direction. We did counterclockwise. So as we filled in the area behind us with web puddles, we rotated counterclockwise and we took a step. So maybe I'll see. You can see the puddles kind of forming, and we're rotating. Actually, we're rotating clockwise here. It doesn't matter. Pick whatever direction you want. And we're rotating away from these web puddles as they are created. And that just gives us more space to actually play with and not be stunned on heroic difficulty. Only other thing in this phase is the big over-infusion burst AoE, which happens at 100 energy. Oh, there we go. So it's just a giant circle that comes out. Everyone just needs to run away from this circle when it goes out. And again, preferably you're not in an area with web puddles. We just managed to squeeze between a couple. And then there's a bunch of circles that need to dodge. And then we're back to the boss. And then we get to phase 2, which is at 50% health. And during this transition, it is also a damage amp. Here it comes. So boom, it triggers. Boss has a damage amp. This is probably when you'd want to lust to take advantage of that damage amp. It's only for like 10-ish seconds, it seems like 15-ish. And the boss is trying to figure out what's going on. A bunch more circles in this phase. A puddle spawns underneath the boss in this phase as well. And these will continue to spawn over the course of this fight. Now, I did want to swap POVs here because we have a longer phase 2 in this clip, which makes it easier to see everything. The big thing for phase 2 is that the tank hit becomes a frontal attack that needs to be soaked. So this giant wave here. And then you need to have your raid split into 2. Half of them soak the first one, half of them soak the second one. You just alternate from there. How I recommend you do this is having a melee stack and a range stack. And if you look at our boss positioning, this is how I recommend you do it. Basically, you kind of have the boss kind of overlapping on existing puddles as those puddles spawn. And then you can have the melee stack here pointing this frontal towards the wall. Now, range can be in the direction you plan to rotate as the room fills. And you can see they're all behind me here. And this next frontal is going to be the range frontal. And then when this frontal goes out, I can just point it at the range. It's very easy for them to be in it no matter where they are. They can be spread out for these circles. In melee, it's very easy for them to avoid it as well and just alternate that way. Now, in terms of these puddle spawns, it spawns immediately after each frontal cast goes out, basically. The frontal cast happens. Boom. Then Arcane Outrage happens, and that's a pushback, and it's what spawns the puddle. So that's when you want to make sure you have the boss kind of overlapping on existing puddles if possible, just to conserve space. Then the puddles spawn underneath the boss, and you can move the boss a little bit here. Overlapping is totally fine for melee uptime, as the boss hitbox is relatively large. You can see we're not moving the boss a ton. We're kind of letting it chill in the puddles here. Arcane Outrage spawns more puddles. I could have actually been better with it. And you just keep rotating like that. Again, I have a bit of a raid plan image here, just so you can see how it works. We spawned all our web puddles here. We're rotating away from the web puddles to conserve space because this is cutting off our space as well. come up a little bit, drop a puddle overlap. And again, this could be better if you wanted. And this is how the spread looks. So melee is more like this way. The melee frontal goes towards the wall. The range frontal can be kind of spread like this. Range frontal goes out this way. Makes it a bit easier to handle, in my opinion. And it's just a race to kill the boss before you run out of space. Moving on to boss number 3, Soulbinder Naazindhri. And this is a boss fight that's basically, there's a lot of ads. And the ads spawn in these waves that you can defeat some of them before they actually turn into real ads and spawn into the fight. And on normal, you are actually able to kill all of them before it happens, but on heroic, you kind of have to pick and choose which ones you fight. And actually, before getting into it, I also have a raid plan here with the ad spawns, like where the ads spawn and the type of ads that spawn in each spot. This would be the front of the room over here, by the way. Basically, how these ads work is the phase blades are CC immune, and they do the most unavoidable AoE damage. So we prioritize killing the phase blades before the ad spawn every single time, as many of those as you can. The assassins deal random target dot damage, and then the mages have an interrupt that deals AoE damage if you miss it. Both the mages and the assassins can be CC'd though, so you can kind of use grips, you can group them up, you can use AoE stuns, that kind of thing to lock them down. The phase blades cannot, and they just do a bunch of AoE damage as well, so that's why we prioritize killing them. But basically, as the sets goes on, there's more and more phase blades, so you have to fight more and more of them, even if you are always clearing phase blades. So that's kind of how it gets harder later on in the fight. In terms of how you actually remove ads from the fight, once they spawn, there's these, like, you know, this smoky stuff, boom, they'll pop up in these canisters, and if you hit these canisters with the Soul Fray Annihilation ability, it will destroy them. And that is this line attack here. It targets 2 random players, and these notably stop on the first thing hit. So if there's another player in this path, it will hit them and it will not break a container. So it's important that you kind of put these in a way that they will hit the ad canisters. Everyone else gets out of the way. Then you can cleave these ads. They're not actually active. You can see 90 seconds left. And now we can move and get ready to hit another set of canisters. Other abilities, these star formation dots goes out on random players, and then they shoot out in that direction, these slow moving orbs. So move away from the group if you're debuffed, and everyone watch. Other big mechanic is this arcane expulsion here. You can use this to kind of move towards the next ad you want to break because it's a big knockback. Don't get pushed off the edge. This is just the abyss over here, so that will be bad. Boom, knockback, as well as a dot. It's a 12-second dot there. So this is like the raid damage of the fight. So make sure you have healing prepared for that. And then we're just kind of moving between the phase blade mobs as we can. Kill them again with the next line attacks. And you get 3 of these per phase before the ads actually spawn. So you can move forward here. We're going to kill 1 more. And then after this, we're going to move towards the middle to kill all the remaining ads because they will be spawned. Boom, bunch of mages for interrupts, a bunch of assassins dealing damage, and I think this first one has no phase blades, but the later on ones will have phase blades. And from here, the fight just repeats, and like I said, it's just based on the ad positioning. On normal, I believe there was only 6 ads on the PTR, so you only had 6 frontals. You could kill all 6 ads. On heroic, all of the ads were active, and this is what the sets were. And again, we prioritized phase blades. So in the first one, we did, here to here to here. On the second one, you can start in the bottom here, kill these 2. You can move back to mid, you can kill 2 in the mid, and then you can move down here, kill 2 here, and that leaves you with 2 phase blades you have to fight. And then similarly here, you'd likely want to start out here, kill 2, move here, kill 2, move here, kill 2, and you still have a phase blade. So you are still going to be fighting phase blades later on in the fight. You can only just avoid them on that initial wave. And again, these might change based on PTR to live, so be wary. The priority is just killing phase blades. Moving on to Forgeweaver Araz. So this fight, it revolves around these collectors that are spread around the room here. The boss will interact with them throughout the fight. On heroic, there are 3, as you can see. On normal, this one at the entrance here doesn't exist, so you only have to deal with 2. So there's less mechanics overall going on, and it's a lower DPS check in the intermission, as we will discuss in a second. So when the boss activates these collectors, he'll do this, invoke collector. He'll channel into one of the 3. It'll spawn a bunch of stuff for you to avoid. It'll do some ticking damage to the group. It'll debuff a bunch of players with this dot, as you can see, and this will spawn an ad after it explodes. Now, this wasn't actually cleaving, even though it looks like it would cleave. So that is something that may change, but we could just stack these up under the boss. Boom, spawn some ads. These ads do a bunch of damage if they reach the collector that spawned them. So you want to just CC them and cleave them down under the boss. So that is the priority. Outside of the collector stuff, there's this soak circle over here that you were seeing being run away. This needs to be soaked to reduce the amount of raid damage it does when it explodes. It does not need to be a ton of players. Like, you can do like 2 to 4 players in this soak and it's totally fine. It's more than enough. So notably on heroic difficulty, this does put a debuff on soakers. So you need different groups of soakers for each of these. They can alternate again. They can go into every other. Now, after this soak goes off, it's going to spawn an ad. This is an echo. And basically what this does is it just copies the boss's abilities whenever he does them. So when he channels into a collector, this echo is also going to channel into a collector, which means that if it's alive when that happens, and this one got absolutely owned, it'll spawn more circles, it'll spawn more ads, it'll do more raid damage. So it is beneficial to kill that ASAP. The reason we spawned it so far away is that on heroic, there is a buff if the echo is within 20 yards of the boss. They both get buffed. They do more damage. They take less damage. That's bad. On normal, that doesn't exist. So you can just drop this right next to the boss on normal, cleave him down real quick, really easy. You can kill that boss ASAP. On heroic, there's 2 strats. There's either doing this where you spawn it further away. And honestly, positioning wise, I think you should have the boss centered, by the way, and you should put the echo over here if you were doing that strategy. So you can do that. They never even proc the buff for a second. The other strategy some people were using to maximize damage on the echo is they were spawning the echo right next to the boss, and then they were moving the boss 20 yards away. This is nice because it lets you get way more damage on the echo immediately because all the melee, all the range are there hitting stuff already. They can splash their damage, and the boss's buff and the ad buff is slightly delayed. It did not tick instantly, so it's another thing that to be aware of. If they change that, this could make that strategy worse. And because of that, you could just drag the boss away. And even if they had the buff for 1 second when you're not done dragging the boss away yet, it wasn't a big deal. And it would fall off once the boss has moved out of range. And again, that's just to prioritize killing the echo ASAP. I don't think it's going to be required, and it is higher coordination. So if you prefer, just drop the echo 20 yards away. Like, you can drop the echo like here-ish, and you can have the boss be here. And then you can just have everyone swap to the echo when it spawns, and then swap back to the boss once the echo is dead. Either way, the echo is the priority here. Kill that first to reduce the number of mechanics. From there, we can talk about the intermission, which is when the boss reaches full energy. And the echo. Here's the echo copying the abilities, by the way. So we have twice the amount of things to dodge, more ads coming out, etc. When the boss actually reaches full energy, though, you get the intermission. So all the collectors become active. So that's 3 on heroic and 2 on normal. And then 1 at a time, they start gaining energy. And it's indicated by this like energy circle here. That's the one that is gaining energy first. So you can see the on the frames I have as well, only one of them is gaining energy. So find the one that is gaining energy, and you want to kill that first, because when these get to full energy, they channel a beam to the middle of the room that basically deals lethal raid damage if it reaches the middle. So you want to kill them ideally before that happens. So prioritize always going to the one with this circle of energy. That's the one gaining initially, and then the next one's going to start gaining energy eventually. Looking at the frames at the side of my screen here, boom, that one gets to 48. Next one starts gaining, so we'd want to go to that one when it gains. So it would be the one over here, not the one I'm at right now. And the other thing you'll notice is these shielded attendants begin to spawn throughout the room. 2 of them. Tanks need to pick up 1 each. They have a stacking tank debuff that's pretty nasty, so keep that in mind. And the actual goal of these ads is they're not the priority target, but they're interact with a mechanic you actually have to play on Mythic. But on Heroic, if you are slow with killing these collectors and they hit 100 energy and they channel the beam to the center of the room, if the attendant is between the collector and the middle of the room when the beam hits, it actually hits the attendant instead, and it stops the raid damage from happening. So you can do that if you are slow. Otherwise, prioritize the collectors. The attendants are secondary. You kill all 3 collectors, the boss reappears, and there's a damage amp on the boss for like 10 or 15 seconds. So you can do that. There it is. Yeah, 10-second damage amp on the boss. You get to own the boss a bit, cleave these attendants, and then tanks are dealing with the swap between these attendants as needed. And then phase 1 repeats again. The intermission repeats again. unchanged. And then you get an auto phase into phase 2 when the boss is, I think it's like 25 or 15% depending on the difficulty. It starts with this Dark Terminus ability. In this case, it's just happening because we pushed the boss, but this would otherwise happen after the second intermission. It's going to launch us, so you want to get launched to the front of the room here where you come in, because where the boss was gets filled with void energy. And so here you're just getting constantly pulled into that void at the front. The closer you are, the harder the pull in, so be careful. And that's why we're over here, and you're basically trying to burn the boss before you die. So I recommend lusting that second damage amp if you get it. But again, there is an auto health phase as well. So if you're not going to get that second damage amp, then you should probably just lust when you move into this phase, as it's, it's basically a race. There's some ads that spawn in this phase as well. So same deal, group it up under the boss. Use CCs on them, use grips, use slows, cleave them. They're trying to get to the front of the room, to the void area, and they blow up if they do that. So don't let them do that. Just kill them under the boss. And it's just a burn phase, essentially. Nothing other than this is happening. You're just owning the boss. So a little bit of race against time. Cool boss fight, though. Definitely enjoyed it. That brings us to the Demon Hunter boss. This is your classic council boss. Two of these guys are tanked in Valerian and Alyssa. The other guy here just hits people and randomly jumps around the room. The main important mechanic is this Devourer's Ire, I would say. When this goes off, he's going to shoot out these orbs that someone in your raid needs to intercept. And that's going to give them a magic debuff. So you're going to shoot them out. Boom, there's soaks. People needed to soak this, otherwise it's a hit of raid damage. And you can see, boom, 2 people have this debuff. What this debuff is 100% physical damage taken increase, so your tanks can't have it, first off. And then when it is dispelled, it will jump to a nearby, I think preferably ranged, non-debuffed player. So these are just going to remain for the rest of the encounter. Now, the players that have this debuff are going to be in a bit of danger because the untanked guy is just spamming consume specifically at debuffed players only is what this is getting hit into. This is just some damage and a healing absorb. On heroic, this also is a stacking 1-minute damage amp to consume, which forces you to trade off these debuffs between 2 or 3 players potentially, depending on how long you actually want them to hold the debuff for. On normal, though, you can just assign 2 or 3 people, however many debuffs there are, and they can just have them the entire duration of the boss fight because there's no stacking damage amp going out on them. Now, why this is important is because the people with this debuff are required to soak puddles to clear them. So here you go. Occasionally, the Adaris jumps around. He spawns a bunch of puddles, and you can see the debuff people, they need to stand on these puddles to make them disappear. If they don't fully soak them, they start to grow again. So you really, really need to make sure that these people, specifically on the melee stack, wherever Adaris jumps to, is these debuff people are there and they are soaking those puddles away so that there's room on the encounter space. Again, very, very important to clear them all when you possibly can. In terms of other mechanics, the big one is Hunt. Here it is. Boom. It's going to, I'm going to rewind a little bit actually. It's going to target a random player. Valarin jumps away. She tries to hunt at a random person. There's this line attack. You can soak in this line to reduce the damage done. On heroic, you have these circles as well that makes you splash, so you can't throw your entire raid in here. But on normal, you can just kind of stack up in here and mitigate that damage. Either way, though, the person actually being hunted should probably pop a defensive because it is quite scary. And then you just want to get in here to reduce the damage as much as you can without splashing your friends on heroic. I do also want to briefly mention the tank mechanic here. One of them is just a frontal, so you're going to point that away. The other one, though, spawns souls. Here it is, Fracture. It's going to spawn 2 souls behind the tank, so you can do what I did there and face them towards your group. You have a 66% healing reduction while these souls are out here, so people in the raid need to touch one of these to remove that healing reduction from your tank. They get a 20-second dot in the process, so you don't want the same person to do both, but you need your raid to actually soak these to clear that healing reduction. So be ready to do that. From there, there's intermissions that happen whenever the bosses reach 100 energy. It's always in the same order. So the first one is always going to be Adaris. Just fast forward to that. Here it is, Metamorphosis. He jumps to the center, and there's just going to be these blue orbs that start falling towards the center of the room, and you need to soak these before they reach the boss, otherwise he does damage. And they just do a stacking dot on soakers. You can immune these as well, so you just kind of play goalie here. Make sure you stop these from getting into the boss. That's the first intermission. Second intermission, fast forwarding, is going to be the Havoc Demon Hunter, I believe, Valarin. And yeah, it's basically just a bunch of blaze lines or like Kaiveza lines on people. So if you do get it, try and dodge on your line path. Don't try and like move your line a bunch side to side. That's bad. Stay on your line path if you can, and just avoid getting cleaved by 2 lines at once. Defensives as needed. Then the third and final intermission is the Vengeance Demon Hunter. And this guy just leaps randomly and does a giant frontal attack. Boom, giant frontal across the circle. There are 3 safe areas, I guess 4. It's like to the left and the right of the frontal, to behind the boss. And then actually the far side of the frontal as well, if you were on the edge of the circle. This frontal, at least on PTR, didn't reach the whole length of the circle. So there's 4 potential safe areas for you to go to handle this. Finally, last intermission, if you do ever get to it, is just the Enrage. So, oh yeah, here they go. They're just doing all the abilities, all 3 of them at the same time. So you want to kill the boss before this happens. And then all the boss phases, by the way, between these intermissions are exactly the same. They're all as the first one we mentioned. So that is it for the Soul Hunters. Then we get to Fractillus, where I am not going to show you my POV because it's terrible. You can see my POV probably from Bancher's POV. Shout out Bancher's. It is in a corner against a wall the entire fight. Not ideal. Basically, this is a single target DPS check, 1 phase encounter. It's got this like Tetris style mechanic where the boss enrages if you put 6 walls in one of the 6 available sections. And currently, at least on the PTR, it's just solvable via a weak aura. So either like the Northern Sky pack or the Liquid weak aura pack, those will likely have a weak aura that just solve this boss if it's not changed. You can use that. But I still want to give you a general like visual idea and like the base strategy of this boss. Like most burn bosses, it's going to be a lust on pull. And essentially how this works is that twice per phase, 4 people are going to be assigned to build walls. And that is with these arrows here. These walls, when they shoot out, will put a dot on anyone they hit. So you're going to see them shoot out in a second here. Entropic Induction, boom. Little knockback on anyone hit as well. So you want to have the raid stacked in one section that is not getting hit by any walls. And then these people put them in different sections. On top of this, the Tank Buster and Shockwave Slam also puts a wall, which is where you see little... Oh, look, there's me. There's me, guys. Imagine what my POV looks like. So yeah, they drop a wall as well, which is why they're in a corner. They can use the walls to prevent the knockback as well, which is why, you know, they're off on their own. Here's the second set of walls happening. You can stack them here. Like you're going to see, I think, potentially people stack them. And you will just get 2 stacks of the dot. Not ideal, but not the end of the world, especially at 2. Going much higher than 2 is probably a bit scary. Now, all the walls have been made in this phase now. What happens after that is that 5 random players and then 1 of the tanks randomly will get picked to crystallize, and that will cause them to break a wall in the section they are in. You can stack up with this one. This one does not put a wave through the section you're in. It doesn't stack up damage on people if you're also in the same section, so that is fine. But if there aren't enough walls to break in that section, then you will waste the break. You can still, like, for example, this section has 2 walls. There's 2 people here. That will break both walls. You don't necessarily know which person is going to get counted as breaking each wall, and that is important for in a second because the walls do different things. But you can break 2 walls in the same section or even 3 walls in the same section if you stack up people here. Just don't put one of these crystallizes in a section with no walls, and don't overcommit crystallizes to a section with only a couple walls. Now, on normal, there are only these blue walls, and these walls just create circles on the ground that you need to avoid when they're broken. On heroic, you start getting these purple walls, and you will see they spawn in static position. So like the furthest one back is always a blue wall, the second wall is always purple, the third wall is always blue, etc. So it was working like that on PTR. So these purple walls, when they break, it puts a dot on the person that broke it, so the crystallized person, and they get a 10-yard AoE around them as well. So you need to wait away from the group, let that explode before going back to the actual platform or the main spot. So you're going to see the crystallized go out here, the backhand, boom. It's also a raid hit. Here are all the circles from breaking the normal walls. And then you can see these other circles go out as well on the breakers and other random people based on the number of purple walls that got broken. So we broke a lot of purple walls here, which is why so many people got debuffed, right? So it's not just the person breaking the wall, it's also other random people. And then there's circles as well. And I made a little raid plan. I'm not sure how useful it was. This also copies the markers we had in the video. I think the Liquid or Northern Sky Weaker will have set markers just so people know where to go. But basically what our general strategy was, tanks just sat in circle the whole time. The raid generally stood in star until we needed to move to a full pathway. But initially we were on star, and we were just dropping all of our walls in triangle, X, moon, and skull. All four walls were there, spreading them out so we weren't stacking the dot if possible. And then all of our breaks would also go there. And the tank break initially would also go not in the tank area, because the tank area only gets one wall per phase, whereas all of these other areas that aren't star where the raid is getting 2 walls per phase. And then eventually, if the boss lasts long enough, you would need to move the raid. So like if X is getting to like 4 or 5 walls, you could then move the raid to be on the X marker. I guess I can put a marker here. Right, you can move the raid to be on the X marker instead, and then you could start filling up star more. And similarly, you could start moving the tanks over to skull to fill up skull less, and you could fill up orange more as well, depending on what is needed. But again, a weak aura is definitely going to solve this boss, at least in its current state. And check out the Liquid Pack and Northern Sky Pack if you want to see that weak aura. That brings us to the final and most complicated boss here, and this is also one that may potentially change, so I might have to put a standalone guide to this guy. But this is Nexus-King Salhadaar, the second to last boss. And right off the bat, on heroic, on this boss fight in phase 1, if you ever die, you get mind controlled. So that is a thing to keep in mind. Otherwise, shortly after pulling the boss, he does this Decree Oathbound AoE damage channel. So beware of that AoE damage immediately. And this puts 3 stacks up of the Oathbound debuff on the entire raid. And basically, you need to clear the stacks by the end of the phase. Otherwise, you take a bunch of damage and likely die. And in order to clear that stacks, you need to be a part of a Conquer Soak. So this is part of the tank combo that happens. The tank combo is one of 2 abilities, and it happens 4 total hits in the combo. Each ability casts twice. One is that Conquer Group Soak, and one is a Vanquish Frontal that will murder any non-tank inside of it. So you kind of alternate between dropping the Soak on the group and moving their Frontal away. This combo is a bit more complicated than that. I talk about it in the tank tips video if you want to watch that. Not going to go into it in this video. Basically, when you clear a stack with this Conquer hit as well, it will do a hit of group damage. Here it is. And so that's a good spot to stack things like AMZs, like Spirit Links, like Disc Barriers, that kind of thing. And in general, my recommended strategy, at least the strat we're going to be going with early on, week 1, week 2 of the patch on heroic difficulty, is we're going to have the entire group stack in 1 Conquer per set of the tank combos, because you get 3 total in this phase, and that will clear everyone's stacks. And then we'll have the tank solo the other Conquer. Now, this was doable on the PTR with pretty much every tank spec with just stacking of defenses. Again, talk about that in the tank tips video, but that basically minimizes group damage and makes it a little bit easier as well. There's going to be like orbs flying out at the same time. You need to dodge, etc. It's quite difficult. And so only having 1 soak where you can stack defensives is much easier in our opinion. That being said, if you are not comfortable doing that in your group, it's a little bit coordination intensive for the tank, etc. You can instead split your raid in half. One of them will be in the tank group soak for one tank. One of them will be in the tank group soak for the other tank. They can just stack like on the left and the right. And then the tanks can go, for example, I would always go to the right stack. The other tank would always go to the left stack. And then you would sort it that way. It's a little bit more damage, but especially later on in the patch, that's totally fine to do in my opinion. Whatever is easier for your group. So here's what the Vanquish looks like. Notice the positioning here. We pull the boss slightly off center. We point Vanquish away from the group. The raid is stacked on the outside here. All the soaks go there. Notably, you cannot be on the actual outside of the platform because these phase dragons just murder anyone nearby. And then the other thing, like I mentioned, they will be shooting orbs in this phase. It was bugged on the PTR during heroic testing, and they were like barely shooting their orbs. So there is probably going to be stuff to dodge in this phase as well. Now, immediately following the tank combo, Banishment will go out. It will debuff a few players. That is followed by Behead, which debuffs a few players, which I believe cannot target Banishment players. So keep that in mind. These deal damage in a line and also drop a puddle. So our strategy was to just drop this behind us. It happens initially. We stay here. A second wave of Beheads happens. This is the last wave of Beheads. They also drop it on not existing puddles. And everyone else who did not get debuffed rotates a third of the room, because like I said, there's 3 sets of tank debuffs in this phase. We rotate a third of the room. We filled up a third of the room with these puddles, and now we do the exact same thing on this part of the platform. So again, the raid stacked here, the tank combo is going to happen. Again, there's some more dots going out. There's some more balls getting shot out here, or there's supposed to be. Tank combo happens, raid stacked up. There's one singular ball. Woo, there we go. There's supposed to be more of them, but that's what they look like. Again, we're group soaking. One tank is either soloing a conquer here, or you've split the raid into 2 groups, either or. And then we're doing the double beheads, and then we're rotating the last third of the room. From here, the boss phases. In phase 2, you now have a dragon. The outside of the room is safe again because the dragon has coalesced into an actual dragon. And you're tanking the dragon in this phase, so make sure it gets picked up. You have these giant circles going out. The size increases based on difficulty. It's smaller on normal. I recommend putting these out towards the edge of the platform because they do also spawn these void portals on hit. At least they did on PTR. So on normal and heroic PTR testing, these spawn the portals. On mythic PTR testing, the portals spawned in static positions. I don't know if that's a mythic only mechanic or if they changed it so that all difficulties function that way. So keep that in mind. The portals may randomly just spawn in the middle of the room and not be tied to that debuff, but they may still be tied to that debuff, in which case you want to point them to the end or edge of the room rather. And the reason for that is because they are tied to the tank beam in this phase. So Dimension Breath is going to go out here, and you're going to see all the portals that spawned from those circles also have a line attack coming out of them. And so this beam attack is a frontal line. It's going to shoot out, and it's going to shoot the beam from every portal as well, which rotates slightly. So you need to make sure your raid is avoiding that. On heroic difficulty as well, you're going to see in a second here, the tank is going to blow up for raid damage based on the amount of damage they took from that breath. And so, boom, lots of damage. You need to make sure you apply heavy mitigation to that. Things like AMS are really good if you're able to absorb the whole thing. Things like Bubble really good. Again, not going to talk about it too much, but that is a heroic specific mechanic. And then this phase is interrupted by an intermission where you have to go to 2 different side portals. So this is one of them. It's the exact same on the other side. The exact same mobs besides the mini boss has a different name, but they do the exact same thing. So split your raid directly in half here. In terms of tanks and healers, and the goal is to just kill this MANAFORGE Titan before he reaches 100 energy and self-destructs. There's a kick on the mini boss you need to do. There's circles to avoid. There is Reapers do some damage, but you can CC them as well and stop them. There's some beams that rotate around as well, which you need to avoid. But basically, it's just kill the Titan before he blows up, and then you want to go back when the other group goes back as well. You're using your cloak here, by the way. You get an extra action button that pops up. Use that. Boom, and then you are repeating phase 2 again here. So same thing as the first phase 2 we had. And then eventually this is going to get interrupted by another intermission. This is a 30-second damage amp on the dragon here, while the boss is like a 99% DR'd. And basically at the end of this cast, he will destroy the dragon and heal himself based on the dragon's health. So you probably want to be lusting here because of the damage amp and murder this dragon as much as possible, because that is also going to make your phase 3 shorter, and that phase is crazy. So moving to that real quick, here it is. So basically there's 2 big mechanics in this phase. The first is Galactic Smash. It comes out instantly. This targets 5 players and the active tank, and when it explodes, it's going to deal damage to everyone based on distance. So you want to be far away from them. So it's good to start in the middle here, in my opinion. It's going to spawn a void circle underneath all of them, which pulls in players based on positioning. So it's very similar to Nexus Princess Kaiveza. Basically the exact same mechanic, which is why they need to be spread out. If you put all these in one area, everyone is going to get sucked into them and immediately die. So you need to spread them out to distribute the pull-in effect. And then shortly after that, they will turn into stars. The pull-in ends, and these stars do a few interesting things. So first off, they constantly pulse for group damage, so that's some damage in this phase. Second, they continue to have that void zone underneath them, so if you actually touch them, you will just die to that void zone. And third, they have these rings which will pulse out, and you need to avoid as they continue to pulse out these spikes. I do not recommend standing in the middle here. As you see, they're all going to converge. When this happens, I actually recommend running towards one of the stars slightly to make it easier to dodge. Like if you just had run this way, there's much less rings to dodge. You run here, you dodge here, and then you can move back towards the center after all the rings have gone out. I think that would be easier than having this hellhole not too far towards one side, but just a little bit, because otherwise it's absolutely awful to dodge, as you can see. And then that leads us to the next actual mechanic, which is Starkiller Swing. Actually, notably, you're seeing these stars rotate around the room. That is a heroic mechanic. So on normal, they will be stationary, very easy to handle. On heroic, they are rotating around the room, making all this mechanic, the Starkiller Swing, and the ring mechanic harder to handle. Now, Starkiller Swing. This will target the active tank and then 2 random players with this beam. This beam needs to hit a star, otherwise it deals a massive hit of group damage. You might be able to survive one going off if one person miss, but early on, probably not. And if multiple people miss, you are likely going to die as well. So this needs to hit a star, so everyone needs to find their own star and hit that star with the beam. It pierces the player, so you don't need to go behind the star, you just need to line up with it. Obviously, again, harder on heroic because the star is moving, but you hit it, it's good, it blows up, it's gone, you don't need to deal with it anymore. Very, very hype. This will happen a second time, so 2 more random players and the new active tank, who's taunt swapped, is going to get targeted by the next one, Starkiller Swing again. So watch the lines. They don't all happen from the boss. Only the tanks happens from the boss. The other 2 come from images. Boom, you want to hit them. And then it just repeats. So now we're going to get another Galactic Smash going out on 5 new players and the tank. So this is basically the entire phase here. You're just rotating between dealing with these stars, spawning them, getting pulled in, dodging the waves, destroying them again. It's just, there's a lot going on, lots of rooms for error, which is why you want this phase to be as short as humanly possible. Now, in terms of optimal positioning, again, we just did like outside. The outer ring might be too far for some people, but does reduce the damage a bit more. There might be some cheese strat that gets developed here. I will post about it in the comments, maybe make a whole new video covering if there is some cheese strat that people end up making to make the star positioning in this fight, or phase rather, a little bit easier. But otherwise, just spread them out evenly towards the far ends. And again, shift in and out of being towards the center and towards one end to make dodging a bit easier. And then you can move back towards the center once you've actually dodged the rings and this area has become clear. But there we have it, guys. That is my full MANAFORGE Omega raid guide, minus Dimensions, of course. Hopefully you learned something. If you did, make sure you like and subscribe for more content like it, including that standalone Dimensions guide, mythic boss guides, and much more. Of course, none of this content would be possible without the support of my amazing Patreon, so thank you guys for that. Otherwise, I appreciate all of you watching, and I'll see you in the next video.